When I was a teenager, I worked at Blockbuster. I know, I'm really dating myself with that tidbit, but ever since they went out of business, there's this strange, unspoken camaraderie between former employees. Meeting someone else who once wore that iconic blue shirt, it's kind of like finding a long lost sibling. When we meet, we can immediately bond, swapping stories about weird customers, unruly kids, and collecting late fees. Sure, it could be tedious at times. I promise, nobody misses having to sift through dozens upon dozens of tapes and DVDs, organizing and restocking them throughout the course of your shift. But compared to most jobs, it wasn't a bad deal. The pay wasn't great, but there's no food or kitchen to clean up. You get to hang around all day and watch movies. You even end up discovering movies that you never would have otherwise seen. That's how I saw it, or used to see it anyways. Because recently, I came across a unique collection of former employees, but what they experienced was not typical. You see, while I was working at Blockbuster, there had been this urban legend among certain employees. Some claimed there was a secret branch of Blockbuster, a store so secret that only a handful of people knew about it. Where it was and how it came to be, those details varied wildly. But the only constant was what this hidden store contained. Think of any movie made before the year 2010. Be it a kids movie, a chick flick, an animated movie, or some R-rated smut fest. Doesn't matter if it was a big budget movie from a major studio or some grainy independent film from half a century ago. This hidden blockbuster, according to the legend, contained special versions of those films. But I'm not talking about director's cuts, limited editions, or even forbidden media. These versions were a bit more disturbing. The example that most believers in the legend use involves the first Terminator movie. The movie would start off normally. The opening credits are the same as the official version. But then, at around the halfway point of the movie, the screen flickers, the movie stops, the background sound fades, and, well, that's when the people telling the story often are at a loss for words. It's also here where the legend gets really crazy. I mean, if someone is just relaying what they've heard, they usually say something like flashing devils or images of demons in hellfire. But to those who've claimed they've actually seen these hidden movies or been to this hidden blockbuster, well, they're not too casual. I've seen more than one person freeze in terror trying to recount it, like someone with PTSD reliving past trauma. And I've worked with military veterans. I built a career around treating people who suffered from trauma. But those who claim to work at this hidden blockbuster, I've never seen anyone react like them. I know, it already sounds crazy, like one of those urban legends made up on a dare or a whim. And that's how I saw it too. Most former Blockbuster employees even joke about it, claiming anyone with a bad experience probably worked at the hidden blockbuster. Now, I tried not to go that route, mostly because I thought the people sharing those stories had many other issues. I've even offered to help a few of them who claim to still be traumatized. But they have always refused, and they even give the same excuse. You can't help me. No one can help me. Not after what I saw at the hidden blockbuster. It was a disappointing and distressing response, but I opted to just leave it at that. I figured if they ever wanted to talk, they'll make that choice on their own terms. I honestly couldn't imagine anyone just living with such trauma for the rest of their lives. That is, until recently. Oh, this is where I start to sound crazy. I've tried talking about this with others. I've tried sharing about it with others who take the hidden blockbuster story seriously. But so far, well, let's just say the results leave a lot to be desired. I'm going to do my best to tell my side of the story, but bear with me because this isn't easy for me. It all began when I returned home for a family reunion. My hometown had changed a lot since I'd been there. Entire blocks had been razed and rebuilt. Entire neighborhoods and communities had completely changed. The only thing that didn't change all that much was this tiny strip mall about 5 blocks from my house. The same strip mall that had once housed the Blockbuster I worked at. But even that was about to go down. That strip mall was an eyesore. It couldn't hold on to tenants and was never more than half occupied. Even when the Blockbuster had been there, it felt like a failing enterprise. Finally, a developer came in and bought the land, and they announced plans to demolish the whole area to make way for some apartments and condos. And one of my uncles, who's an architect, was actually working on the project. He's the one who told me that the last tenants had moved out, and he also told me that the old vacant Blockbuster building is still there. He even suggested that I should drop by to say goodbye. I wanted to be mad at him for making such a dumb request, but then again, he'd made it jokingly. I doubt he thought I'd actually go there, but for reasons I still can't explain, I found myself paying that place a visit. I ended up going the night before I left town. I just couldn't sleep thanks to lingering jet lag. And I honestly didn't know if I would ever return to my hometown after this. So I just got in my car and drove up to the strip mall at 10 past midnight on a cloudy night. I know, it sounds even dumber when I say it out loud. But however dumb it might have been, I soon found myself standing in front of that old, decrepit building. I could even make out the faint outline of the old Blockbuster logo. I figured nobody bought the retail space after it closed, but that says more about the strip mall than it does about Blockbuster. For a while, I just found myself sitting on the hood of my car, looking at the building and reliving old memories. I recalled the time I snuck my high school girlfriend into the back room to make out, the time I caught my boss smoking pot in his car, the time some kids fought over the last copy of Toy Story 2. I laughed at some of those memories and cringed at others, but overall, it was a mixed bag for my first job. I couldn't tell you what drove me to go inside that place. Maybe I was just restless, or maybe I just wanted to smell that distinct scent of microwave popcorn butter one last time. But whatever the reason, I went in. The front door was locked, but the side door was a rusted piece of junk, which I easily jerked open. My former manager kept it that way, mostly because he kept getting locked out. The fact it never got fixed was quite telling. But inside the building, well, there wasn't much. That distinct Blockbuster smell I mentioned earlier, it was long gone. There was none of the old aesthetics I remembered, aside from some tattered carpet and faded wall paint. And the only thing I smelled at that point was mold, mildew, and a twinge of human excrement, a sign that this place had seen its share of homeless people taking shelter. I lingered around for just a few minutes. I had gone down my nostalgia trip, and I was ready to get off. The last place I checked was my manager's old office. It was little more than a nook in the corner of the place, not much larger than a walk-in closet. It had since been emptied. There was nothing left except a dusty desk and war-tattered carpet. But then, just as I was about to leave, I saw it. There was this trap door or something in the floor. It had been covered mostly by the carpet. I doubt anyone cleaning this place out noticed. But I found myself taking a pocket knife and cutting through the tattered fabric, revealing what appeared to be a large cellar door. This I did not remember from my time working there. I don't even know if my manager knew. I couldn't tell if it was something that had always been part of the building or if it had been added later. But whatever it was, my curiosity was piqued. I just couldn't leave without checking what was inside. Even if it was something mundane like a floor safe or a stash of weed, I had to know. So I opened it. And that's when the legend of the hidden Blockbuster became very, very real. I'll spare you the string of profanities I said when I opened the place and saw what was inside. But all you need to know is that what was down there was a lot more than old DVD cases. It was like a hidden chamber in an ancient tomb. Some sort of vault that was not meant for the viewing public. Going down there was like going back in time 2 decades. I saw these display racks loaded with tapes and DVD discs, all in that distinct Blockbuster style. They weren't exactly organized. If anything, they were a mess. It was as though whoever was last here left in a hurry. For all I knew, I was the first person to set foot in this place since the store closed. Not gonna lie, I kind of got a rush out of that. I remember feeling so excited, like I just discovered buried treasure or something. So, using the light from my cell phone, I sifted through the piles of tapes and DVDs. I saw a lot of familiar titles. 80s teen movies, 90s action movies, superhero movies from the early 2000s. It was all there, but there was something strange about them. For one, none of the movies were in their original cases. They were just blank, generic containers with white covers, the titles of the movies being handwritten on them with a Sharpie. At first, I thought they were illegal bootlegs. It never occurred to me that maybe the stories about the hidden Blockbuster were true. But, like an idiot, I grabbed an armful of random movies. One of them happened to be the first Terminator movie. Another was Disney's Aladdin, the movie I recommended most often to kids. There were a bunch of other DVDs, but I prefer not to say what they are, because ultimately that didn't really matter. In addition to the movies, I found this tattered notebook near the rack. I figured it was some sort of inventory guide. I snatched it up as well before slipping out. I also closed the cellar door, planning to come back in the morning if I could. I then raced home and went down to my uncle's basement. He was a bit of a pack rat, so of course he had an old VCR TV set. And after plugging it in and hooking it up, the first movie I put in was Aladdin. I really just wanted to see if the tape still worked after all this time. And turns out it did. But what I saw did not bring back fond childhood memories. The movie began horribly distorted. There weren't any previews either. It just went right into the opening scene. But when the merchant started talking and the music started playing, it all looked so off. The characters on the screen, they seemed unusually expressive. Even though it was animated, I swear, you could see this weird tint in their eyes. Even during the songs and the dancing, they would carry themselves as though they were in pain. Subtle but noticeable pain. I thought it was just some weird air-laden cut of the movie, one that had been polished before going to theaters. I found myself fast-forwarding through a number of parts. I wanted to see if the distortion faded as the movie went on. But then, as soon as I got to the halfway point, the moment before Aladdin and Jasmine go on their magic carpet ride, it stopped. By that, I don't mean the movie froze. I didn't even press anything. The movie, it just stopped. No music, no sound effects, nothing. But the characters on the screen, it's like they just snapped. They started looking at the screen as if they were looking directly at me. They were just dead silent for a while. I tried to fast forward again, but for some reason that didn't work. And as I'm trying to figure out what's wrong, Aladdin and Jasmine start approaching the screen. And with each step they took, they looked less and less kid-friendly, if that's the right term. The tint on their eyes changed, and that pain I mentioned earlier became a lot less subtle. Finally, their expressions twist into this look of sheer madness. and they start banging on the other side of the screen, as if they're banging on a window. And together, they start yelling in this deep, downright demonic voice.
Let us out! Let us out!
It freaked me the hell out, so much so that I ejected the tape and turned the TV off. For a second, I just sat there, holding it in my hands, trying to make sense of what I just saw. The tape is still warm. Too warm, actually. It's almost hot. I put it away. I should have put the others away too, but damn it, I was stupid enough to put in another tape. And this time, I picked the original Terminator. I didn't bother watching the opening. I fast-forwarded the movie again, just like I did with Aladdin. And just like with Aladdin, there was a lot of distortion. There was also that same strange tint in their eyes. And then I made it to the middle. That iconic scene in the club, just as Kyle saves Sarah Connors. Then it stopped again. And just like before, the characters on the screen look at me as though they're staring through a window. They're still for a brief moment. Then they all run up to the screen. Not just Sarah, Kyle, and the Terminator, but everyone in that club scene. And they start banging on the screen. They're all yelling the same thing.
Let us out! Let us out!
The TV actually started to shake. The whole basement, it started to feel hot. I fell back in my chair, frozen in place. And as I watched these characters bang on the screen, they start tearing off their own flesh. It's as though the characters were the costume. And what was inside, my God, I can't even describe it. I'm sorry, it's just too much. The TV shook harder and harder, and I tried to turn it off, but the power button didn't work. I tried to unplug it, but it stayed on. All the while, the yelling keeps getting louder.
Let us out! Let us out!
Eventually, the TV shakes so much that it falls off the table and shatters. That finally stopped the yelling. And at that point, I didn't bother cleaning it up. I ran out of the basement, forgetting all the sparks the TV caused. It ended up igniting a small fire, one that quickly filled my uncle's basement. Thankfully, the smoke alarm went off, waking everybody up and getting them out of the house. My uncle called the fire department, and they got there quickly. They managed to put out most of the fire before it completely consumed the house. They even claimed it was caused by some old wiring. And that made sense too. It's not like my uncle kept that place clean. But whatever was left of those movies I took, they were gone. Completely reduced to ash. Now, I know that sounds a bit too convenient. And if I don't exactly sound relieved, well, there's a good reason for that. A good, but horrifying reason. Remember that notebook I mentioned? Well, I still had that in my car. And while most of it was just a basic inventory list, there were a number of notes written in the back. And this is what the last one said. Got word from corporate today. It's really happening. Blockbuster is going under. I'll be out of a job soon. I don't know what I'll do, but they still won't say what we'll do with these abominations. We've been protecting them for years, but more and more, they're going missing. The evil within, I think it's getting stronger. We spent all this time trying to contain them, hiding them from view, stopping the public from setting them free. But now that we're going bankrupt, now that movies won't be contained to tapes and DVDs, I don't know. If this evil gets out, if it frees itself from the movies that contained it, we're all in very serious trouble.